Right is Lisa Kane, Vice Chairman, Laura Hine, Caprice Edmond, Dr. Nicole Carr, Carol Cook, and Bill Dudley. And I'm Eileen Long. All right. We have some key staff in the room. We have Jennifer Dull, we have Beth Harradine and Dr. Corbett, I can't think of your name. I'm looking right at you. I don't think I missed anybody. Oh, Keith Master. How could I miss him? Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay. And where's Joy? Oh, a Joy. Oh, yeah, I see. Boy, I need help today. Okay. All right, let's review the process and time schedule for the board interview. You have 75 minutes for our board interview this morning. You will have 3 minutes to provide an opening statement, and then each board member will ask a series of thematically based questions, student achievement, culture, equity, etc., based on our strategic plan. Each board member is allocated 9 minutes and is prepared to ask up to 4 questions. The number of questions each gets to will depend on the length of your response. You will have time at the end for your final thoughts and questions for us. So, we will start with giving you the floor for 3 minutes for any opening comments or thoughts you may have.
Thank you, Mrs. Long, and good morning, everybody. I'm excited to be here today. I know that you all know my name, Kevin Hendrick, and I'm quite sure you've reviewed my materials. I want to tell you a little bit about me as a person and then a little bit of an opening statement of my vision for the school district. As you know, I'm a proud graduate of Pinellas County Schools. I went to Largo High School, decided as a high school senior to become a teacher, went to college to be a teacher, and started teaching at Pinellas Park High School. I moved to Dunedin, and during that time, I really looked at myself as a teacher leader. I took every advantage I could to support our school academically, socially, emotionally, and athletically. I coached basketball, I sponsored clubs, was on the school advisory council, and continued to grow. That growth would lead to 2 master's degrees, school leadership positions, and soon the principalship at Northeast High School. A school rich in tradition, but a little short on academic excellence. And I made it my goal to make that never happen again. We went from a D to a C in the first year, an A the second year, and never looked back. All of that was built around teamwork and the idea of culture and climate trumps everything else. I was soon tapped to lead our district's teaching and learning division with supporting all of our academic programs, and with your support and that of executive leadership in our schools, we've done great work in the last 5 years that I've been in that position, much of which you know about. I want to share with Mrs. Houck a little bit of a leadership portfolio that outlines some of those accomplishments, and maybe we'll have a chance to talk about some of those. More importantly, though, than the past is what can I do for the district and what's my vision for the future. I believe that our district is well positioned to continue our excellent height. My vision is built around our 110 years of excellence. It's built around our communities, our unique communities, our over 120 schools, and it capitalizes on some areas that we're really strong in, but also areas that we need to grow in. And so in order to meet our goal of 100% student success and our mission of having every child college, career, and life ready, I believe we must become an A school district. We've made great strides to that end, and we're almost there, but we're not there yet. And becoming an A district, yes, is about the metrics, and those are important, but it's about a culture and climate of excellence for everyone in our school district, not just our students, but our employees, our parents, our families, and our community. So I'm excited to share that vision with you over the course of the next 2 days. I have 2 things to give to you. One you've received, and a second is an entry plan as superintendent that I hope we can reference during this interview and certainly tomorrow as well. I look forward to supporting that vision, that mission, and being your superintendent for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Carr, we'll begin with you.
Okay, and
you have 9 minutes.
And I have the area of student achievement and accountability. And our first question is, what are important elements in an accountability model for a school and a district?
Well, in the state of Florida, our accountability models are pretty well defined by state statute and then state board rule. So I think as you think of in terms of a school grade or a district grade, we know what those are. They've been the same for a couple decades. There's been some tweaks here and there, and they'll be tweaked again as we have new standards and a new accountability model. But in terms of beyond the required accountability, I think there are other things that are really important. It's critical that we have leaders that believe in children, that believe that all students can succeed. And so how do we hold that accountability? How do we make sure that everybody in front of our students every day wants their best, believes that they can achieve beyond what they're doing already, and is committed to the outcomes that we've all set as goals? And so there are things that are not in our accountability system that are more important perhaps than those that are in our accountability system. And so some of those things are, how do we treat people? How do we prepare people for life, as our mission says? There's standards of excellence that we should have for every interaction that we have with students, between staff, between the district and staff, with the community. All of those things are critical. So to measure those things, that's why we have a district strategic plan. So it goes beyond what percent of students are proficient. That's an automatic in terms of accountability. But I think our district strategic plan is something that leads us to those other measures. In terms of some things that maybe we're not looking at that we could perhaps look at, I think over the course of a couple days, one of the things that I think is really important is the connection with students after high school. Our graduation rates have been outstanding. We've continued to do great things with Elevating Excellence and other programs, but I think we can do better. And those are things that may not be in the state accountability system, but should be, our eyes should be on all the time.
Thank you. How will you work with leadership in Tallahassee to support the development of our new accountability model?
So all of our school districts have the ability to engage with leaders in Tallahassee, both whether it be the governor's office or the Department of Education, but certainly our local leadership as well. So sometimes we forget that we are a voice in ourselves. So our school board members are voices for our education system in Tallahassee. We're voices for our local state legislators. So it's important to remember that it's not always about what are we doing to go to Tallahassee and do, but what are we doing at home to show people what we're doing is successful, or to show them that, you know, this law that you're considering may not make sense in this context, and so here's perhaps a better way. I've certainly learned over the last decade of ways in order to do that. As a high school principal, I served in a collective of principals from across the state who was able to effectively lobby the legislator to put into the funding bill money for AVID when there's performance assigned to it. So if students are in AVID, they earn the EOC in algebra, or they pass an AP class, they get rewarded, and the school district gets those funds back to reinvest and then build up that pipeline. And so that's been in play now for probably 8 or 9 years. There have been a number of issues that I think we've been successful with. One of them was dual enrollment for our students to earn dual credit for technical college, that we were successfully able to talk to our legislators, explain why that's important. You have a goal to increase technical certifications over here. How do you incentivize that in the accountability system to get that done? I think we've been successful with other initiatives, such as the Summer Career Acceleration Program, different things that have come just to our district around showing the success and then advocating for future funding or changes in legislation. Our gender gap work was another example of how we've brought businesses together, the Education Foundation, local advocacy, and then presented in Tallahassee to get those things done. So I've had a number of experiences to do that. I think the challenge moving forward is always being forward thinking. It's easy to be reactive when it's already happened and say, well, this doesn't make sense for us. But how do you get on the front end of that? So being involved in whether it's the FADS group or FOIL, any of those organizations that have a voice with the state and having those conversations. And I've certainly been able to make connections with many of the folks in the Department of Education to help see where those programs and policies can lead us to.
Thank you. How will you support schools in the understanding of the new accountability model?
I think when it comes to understanding the new accountability model, it starts with understanding the why of changes in standards and testing. So this next year will be a challenge when everyone realizes that there's more testing. There's not less testing. The message has been there's less testing. The reality is there's now 3 required assessments from Tallahassee, right? So we've always had assessments that mirrored that progress monitoring and The board has approved our testing calendar, and we've been questioned, I've been questioned in this room about, well, why do we have that? Why is it required? How come? We're now being required to give 3 assessments and grades pre-K through 8th grade for all of ELA and math, and then ELA 9th and 10th grade. So communicating the why behind it is eventually we want to get to a place where progress monitoring becomes the way in which we have our students assessed, that you grow along the way, that you're not sitting for these summative assessments every single time. But next year will be a bridge year where there will be summative assessments in most grades 3 times, and that's a change. Now, how do you get to the spot where you can do progress monitoring and have quick check-ins and understand that you can differentiate instruction? Well, you have to first validate those standards and new questions and assessments, and that's why there's a pause on accountability, because the state needs a full year to do all of that. It takes a year to do that. If you remember way, way back to FCAT in 1996 or 7 when that started, there were several years of testing, and we would take kids to the auditorium and say, take this test, and they'd say, why? It doesn't count for me. And say, I know, but we need the data. So that system has to go. But then beyond that, once you get past that first year, how do you really understand that the shift is around making students understand content, because that's a key change in the standards, more content-based as opposed to skill. Skills are still important, but we want you to understand the content of that as well. And then once you understand it, move on. You don't have to live in that all year. And so that's what progress monitoring systems will do. And eventually, as they're adaptive and they meet the needs of individual students, that'll be a big success for our state. It'll take us 12 months, 16 months, 18 months, 2 years to get there. But as a district, we have to be able to clearly communicate that message. We can't say it's the same, because it's not the same. We have to be very clear and deliberate in how we do that, make sure our teachers understand it, make sure our parents understand it, make sure our students understand it, so that everybody understands that first assessment, what it means, the second, the third. And then, of course, to win at that game, you have to make sure you're well prepared. So you need to know the standards. And we've been doing that work now for 18 months and getting our teachers ready for that.
Thank you. We have time for one more, and it was touched on, but how will you measure district success beyond the state grading system?
I think we all have to measure our success initially in our relationships and our culture and climate. It doesn't matter if you're an A district or a C district. If your climate is poor, you're not a successful district, period. If people feel that they can't speak out, if people feel like there's a problem at their school, in a department, whatever, we have to be transparent. So I think transparency is a big, important part of that. And people feeling like they're able to be heard, that you listen. It doesn't mean that you're always going to agree with them, but they need to understand the decision. And sometimes the decision is, we've listened to all sides, and this is the direction we're going, and here's the reason. I understand your side wasn't chosen, but we did listen, and we're moving forward. And so I think that's the ultimate measure, is, are we working for our community in the right direction? I think there's metrics like, are we providing the economic boost that we would expect to our community? Are we preparing students for the jobs that this community needs? Are our students well prepared for college and the colleges of their choice? So there's a lot of metrics in the district strategic plan, but I would suggest that beyond the regular accountability, we have to have a system that everyone is proud of, that they feel they have access to, they feel that they can be heard and listened, and that when decisions are made, they're transparent and for the good of the public, which is our students in this case.
Thank you.
I'm going to do the next round of questions. Culture that promotes learning in a safe environment. How do you ensure climate assessment results are used in school improvement planning across the district?
We've had a number of climate and culture instruments over 25 years that I've been involved with Pinellas County Schools on the employee side. And they've been very varied. Some have been sort of open season, call out people's names, be awful to them. Some have been focused on specific district initiatives, right? What do you think about this thing, or transportation, or this academic initiative? Some have been sort of generic, right? What do you think about how is school leadership? How is the academic programs of the district? I think there's a balance between being too specific, but yet not getting enough detail. And so I think when you're talking about the results of climate surveys, and our current ones, which I support, is taking that data and having honest conversations about what it means. Sometimes you do need to read into it a little bit more. You need to be able to sit with the principal or an administrative team and say, let's take a look at this, and even if it's only 4 people who are saying that this is an issue at your school, why might they be saying that? And how do you address that? It may not be that it's going to change, but maybe we haven't been communicating clearly enough as to why this is needed. So we have a cycle for reviewing those, starting with area superintendents, sharing them with schools, schools then sharing them with their teachers, with their community. And I think that cycle needs to be one that is monitored to a certain extent so that we ensure those conversations are happening. If all we do is give it and put it in a file and never look at it, it's a useless activity. So that cycle is happening right now. They've been released to schools. Schools are sharing them now with their faculties, and this is the perfect time of year to do that. Soon they'll start drafting their school improvement plans for next year around June 1st. Then they'll get their school grade data in. Then you combine that with your staff data. You hear what your parents are saying. You hear what your students are saying, which is a great part of these surveys. And then all of that leads to that idea of a school improvement plan for the next year. There is a part in there about culture and climate, and in certain schools, we make sure that that's addressed. If that's a problem at that school, that's how you use it for positive impact. And then occasionally, if it's obvious that there's something wrong, you just directly address those things.
Okay. Describe how you have handled a situation where an employee was failing to perform at expectation levels.
So I think, with 14,000 employees, you're going to have some that shine, you're going to have some that do a great job every day and you never notice, and then there will be some that you have to improve upon. One of the key things I believe, particularly in the last 5 to 10 years, you can't fire your way out of incompetence or malfeasance of employees, right? Yes, there will be folks who have to be let go, but the great majority of all of our employees came to work for Pinellas County Schools because they believe in our mission and they believe in children. And so whether they are a bus driver, they work at Walter Pinnell, they work in our schools, they work in this building, people are here because they believe in children. And so what got you to believe in children at some point that has caused you not to be on point now, right? So if it's a teacher, you signed up to be a teacher because you love teaching. You wanted to be a teacher. You like children. So what was it between that point, whenever that decision was made, and today that we're having this improvement conversation that we have to kind of bridge that gap of excitedness and how do we get you back? So I think when, just an example of working with an employee, you have to be direct. You have to call out the issue. I think one of the leadership traits that I have is that I'm not afraid to say this is the issue. I don't do it in hysterics. I don't do it in yelling and screaming, but I do call it out. And once you call it out, you can start to examine it. It's best called out in private, right? Public praise, private correction. But then you just address it. And so whether that's just simply saying to someone, hey, you could have done a little bit better at this. Sometimes that's all they need. Sometimes it needs to be in writing. Sometimes it needs to go beyond the writing of improvement plans and steps. But you have to be transparent to the person. You have to be fair to the person. And you also have to help them understand why it's an issue. And so I've done that in a number of situations, both in this leadership position, at a school-based position, even as a teacher leader, where you have people on your team who you're not necessarily the supervisor of, but hey, we need your support. If we're going to accomplish this goal, we all have to be going in the same direction.
What are the benefits and drawbacks to schools having autonomy, for each other?
So autonomy comes in a lot of different fashions. There are districts in this state who have school-based budgeting, that the budgeting for schools is completely autonomous. And principals make a lot of the decisions so long as they operate within certain parameters. We have a different take on that to a certain extent in that we give a base budget to everybody. We give you the basic that you need to meet class size. We give you a basic of school counseling services and things like that. And then we allow you, whether it's with your Title I budget, with SAI dollars, or other things to add on top based on your school improvement plan and your needs. So I think if you look at autonomy from just a financial standpoint as an example, 2 different models. I'm not sure one's better than the other. I think that we often hear the phrase that variance can be our enemy. Variance is good in some ways. It's good when it leads to better outcomes. It's not good when it leads to outcomes that aren't acceptable. So we have to have a baseline that we would expect for everyone. So whether that's class size, whether that's a basis of curriculum that we would expect for all students, whether it's the amount of writing every student should receive, the amount of math instruction every student should receive, But then from there needs to be the ability for people to innovate and to excel. So I like autonomy in the sense that we want to cultivate innovation. I don't like it to say, everybody do their own thing and good luck, right? There needs to be oversight, and that oversight needs to be manageable. So I think our schools have autonomy in a lot of ways. I think there's a perception sometimes that, well, I can't do that. And sometimes that perception may be because I don't want to do it. So I use the excuse of, well, I can't do that. I'm not allowed. Well, who told you you can't do that? Why won't you do that? Sometimes it's more work to be autonomous and to innovate. So we need to have both. We need to have a baseline that ensures a basic level, whether it's in curriculum or transportation or in food service, that all students receive and all staff receive, but then also the ability to innovate so that we can excel and become greater.
I think you answered my second question with that, the appropriate level of autonomy versus district processes and procedures.
Yeah.
Want to add anything else?
I think there's lots of examples, and certainly in teaching and learning, we are the key holders of the airtime with students, right? And so yes, we have master schedules, and yes, we check those master schedules because we want to be in compliance with state law, and we want to make sure that we meet the 90-minute reading block. We want to make sure students get intervention, and all those things that are important. But we fail sometimes in saying, and here's the ways that you can innovate, and here's the way that you don't have to use this piece of text, you can use that piece of text. Now, it needs to follow the law if you go use that text, but you can innovate in those ways. And there's a cadence of making sure that you have things for new teachers, you have things for experienced teachers, but that making sure that everybody feels the ability to not just innovate, but excel in different ways. And so I think I can lead that message clearly to our schools and make sure that they understand, yes, this is the baseline, and no, you can't veer from the baseline, but you can go this way or you can go that way.
Besides salary increases, what rewards can you offer employees that would help them feel respected, valued, and needed?
I think one of the hallmarks of my career is making sure that people understand their value and that we always operate with respect. And so whether it's just calling someone by their name because I value what they've done in the classroom and I know them and I've done a little bit of homework before I got to the school, whether it's responding to an email personally, even if it's not with 6 paragraphs, but it's, hey, thanks for sending that my way, we'll get back to you today. Little things like that build trust, which then cultivate in people feeling proud about what they do, and it spreads their brand. I'll give you some examples just quickly. When I was a principal, I used to gather our support staff together to give them just key things about district initiatives. And I would joke with them, you're going to be the voice of why we're doing this new curriculum when someone sees you in the grocery store, and I need you to say these 3 things, right? It's deeper in rigor, it does more writing, and it gets kids a better chance to go to college. I'm like, all right, I got it, right? You don't need to know the do now activity and how we're going to assess it and all those things, but I need you to understand it so that you're able to clearly communicate. I think that's important with all employees, is that they understand the why behind some of the things that we're doing. So for changing a transportation structure, we're changing bell times, they need to understand why, so that they go, okay, that's why, and now I can communicate that out. Little things, though, like one of the ideas I have that I'm excited to share with you is just really revisiting our core values and then celebrating those with our teachers. So for example, every school, every month, here's a pin around connectedness or here's a pin around cultural competence. We're going to celebrate that this month. I want you to acknowledge someone who's demonstrated that this month and reward them with that pin that they can wear and show off and do things like that. When I was a principal, I used to try to send 1 email a week to our staff, not 6, not 12, not 4 on Sunday night, but 1. And that 1 email included the things that they needed to know from the district that week that I filtered down to the bare minimum. But the rest of it was celebrations of teaching and learning that I saw or our administrative team saw that week. And so teachers would run to open that email so that they could see if their name was there. They visited my class. Did they do that thing? Did I do that right? What is he celebrating? How did that happen? Why am I not in there? How do I get in there? And then they also appreciated the fact that I just gave them the bare things that they needed to know that week. And I didn't forward 12 emails to them and have them interpret it and then ask them why they didn't do it. So it's those types of things that I think people look forward to. It doesn't cost a lot of money, but it's important that they see their name and they're celebrated for the things that they should be doing.
Thank you. We're going to turn it over to Ms. Edmond.
I will be reading you questions regarding equity with excellence for all. So, how do you balance the need for educational equity with the current public criticisms of equity?
Good question. I think when you, I'll go back to an answer I've used already, is transparency. When you look at anything that's in our district strategic plan, you look at our definition, our district's definition of equity with excellence for all, anybody would want that for their child. And so you have to show those definitions in other contexts than just the ones that might be gaining traction politically or on the news or whatever. So one of the ones that I've used with parent groups when I've spoken to them is, if your child could not read because of dyslexia, would you want a different level of support for your child versus just the regular classroom support? And the answer is always yes. Well, that's why we have Centers for Literacy Innovation. That's why we have staff developers dedicated to dyslexia, to go out and to support students with that. That costs more money. When you open up a center like that, when you have a staff person dedicated to support something that isn't what everyone else is getting, that's what equity with excellence for all is. So you have to be able to give examples that are beyond the political examples that we sometimes hear. That's number one. Number two is you have to just acknowledge that people have feelings on all sides. You have to listen to those, and then you have to be steadfast in what you believe as a district. If this is in our district strategic plan, we've presented this to the public. The public's had an opportunity to comment on it. We voted on it as a board. We've trained our staff on it. Then that's what we're going to do, period. That's it. If we don't believe in that, then we need to change what we put in our district strategic plan. We need to change what we've trained our teachers on. We need to change the materials that we're using to educate our children if we don't believe in those things. But if we believe in it and we've been transparent about it, then let's go out and do it. And so it's not just around ethnicity and race that we often hear about, but it's around students with disabilities getting the things that they need. It's around English language learners who are coming to our country for the very first time from war-torn nations this week. How do we integrate them into our system? Is it fair to just say, here you go, here's your schedule, good luck? Or do we need an onboarding that's a little bit different? So we just have to be really clear in what we believe in. We need to be public about it, and then just go do it.
The next question, how do you balance the needs of special populations such as ESE students, ELL students, and students traditionally referred to as gifted and talented? What have you done to address the diverse needs of student populations in your district?
Thank you. So all of those fall under teaching and learning, and they all have separate buckets of funding that come to our district to support those students. And so the easy way to start with is to say, you take the funding and it goes back out to support student needs. So whether it's the IDEA budget, if it's the ESE guarantee that comes to us from the state, if it's the Title III budget, which is the EL budget that we receive every year, or if it's the gifted weighted funding that we receive, all of those come into our district and then they go right back out to support students in the same way. So some of the things that we've done more recently to do that and support students, starting with students with disabilities, is really being clear about how we support students, looking at the IEPs and then making sure those services are delivered in the best way. So we've done a lot of training and support for school leaders and teachers on specially designed instruction and really showing schools what that looks like and what it doesn't look like, and that it's going to be different for every single student. Similarly, with English learners, making sure all of the entry points to our standards, whether it's the Florida standards and now the BEST standards, have those entry points and those scales that we can see students come in on. We've created some onboarding scenarios for students coming from other countries that are a little different and unique, so that you don't just go into a brand new high school with 2,000 students and you don't know the language and you don't know anything, but maybe you spend a week or two at Lehman Innovation in a small group size with an EL teacher. We onboard you, we make sure we know you understand, and then you transition to the new school and right into, by the way, advanced and accelerated classes, because it's not a remediation plan just because you've come from a different setting. So it's critical that, particularly with ESE and EL students, we deliver the services and push for acceleration, that it's not about taking students back. With gifted students, some of the things that we've done, you're familiar with the expansion of gifted services, our talent development programs. One of the ones we're most excited about that we sing the praises of all the time is the marrying of our EL and gifted program in the summer with Camp Invention. That really has accelerated both populations of students because we learn best from each other. It's also accelerated teacher growth because our teachers learn from each other. Some perhaps newer ideas that are coming down the pike. Next year will be the first year in middle school that we've really bifurcated the teacher role into a teacher group that's going to focus strictly on instruction and a group that's going to focus on case management. Those are two different sets of skills, and we've asked our teachers to do both for a long time. And then when there are vacancies, like there have been in middle school, varying exceptionalities classrooms, guess who bears the brunt of filling in for the teacher who isn't there? It's both. And so now I'm managing, instead of 25 cases, 30 cases, 50 cases, and trying to do all the instruction at the same time. So we've split those out, and what we've seen, even in this early transfer period, is that teachers are gravitating towards those new roles because we listened to them. We had focus groups with them. We had focus groups with principals. And we said, this is how we can get that model to be a little bit better. And in turn, it delivers greater equity with excellence for our students.
Should you become the next superintendent, what intentional measures will you take to ensure that all existing students, faculty, and staff, as well as students of the future, will be exposed to a system that is dedicated to excellence and equity?
So our district strategic plan leads us in those measures, but let me call out a few that I think are really important. There are some benchmarks along the way that we should pay closer attention to. So one is kindergarten readiness. And so, you know, as the board, we've tried to dramatically increase our ability to have students go to our VPKs because we can ensure quality, resource support, and that they come in kindergarten ready. So that's one of the first benchmarks that we look at for all students, including all the groups that were in the previous questions. The second is then third grade reading. We know that students have to be proficient in third grade in order to be successful, and we've all heard the statistics about if you're not a third grade reader, what does that mean for your ability to exit high school with the skills that you need for college and career life. So third grade reading, and we've done some things around our Pinellas Early Literacy Initiative and the focus that this board and our district has put on early literacy. So I think that's a key metric. A new one that we're really excited that we've rolled out with our middle school principals in the last couple of months is a high school readiness metric from 8th grade. And so we've built around the successful monitoring systems that have led us to a great high school graduation rate. How do we learn from that and put that same process system in middle school? And so we've developed a system that looks at who's off track, who's at risk, and some of those factors are your grades in English language arts and math. Research shows those are the most important indicators, and so we're looking at those for all the subgroups. And so if you're not successful, what's the intervention that we can give you now so that you're ready by the time you get to high school? If we want to get beyond 92% to 100% graduation rate, it's not with the systems that are in high school. It's with the systems that students bring to high school. And that's why we've pushed these things down. So I think those are some of the key metrics that we would look at. At the top end of the scale, it's the college-going rates, and it's the skills that you have when you go to college.
Thank you. And, okay. Specifically, what role have you played turning around underperforming schools, and what would you do to improve the status of these schools in Pinellas County? So 20 years ago, high schools were the problem in our state. Most of them were Ds, lots of Fs, and I worked amongst that. And so I shared earlier when I got to Northeast, I think they had been a D 2 out of the 3 years prior to me being there. It's never been a D since, and never looked back. Our high schools have moved in the grading formula now where it's very difficult to be a D or an F, and the focus is mostly on our elementary schools. So my role with that has been over the last 5 years into looking at it from a lens from the outside, having not worked in elementary schools except for the one day I substitute taught in kindergarten, and looking at it from a lens of how do we solve the issues that we have. And so starting with looking at our curriculum was really important. Everyone had an opinion on our curriculum, and we needed an external evaluator to look at that, and then build from there so that our curriculum is as solid as possible. In terms of turning around struggling schools, so often it relies on leadership. And so I've helped make sure that our schools have good leadership, but more importantly, I've worked a lot with our school leaders on the side as someone who isn't their boss, who can support them in ways that others maybe can't. So if it's walking the campus with you and looking at patterns of student behavior, that's a voice that I can be. If it's certainly making sure that you have the paraprofessional training that you need so small group instruction can work better, that's been critical. I think the most obvious ones are things like reading recovery, the Pinellas Early Literacy Initiative, that are going very, very well in our transformation zone schools right now. Coaching support has been important, training has been important. But in terms of moving that bar, even 5 years ago, if you look at the number of Ds and Fs, we've decreased, and we're in a pretty good place right now, and we'll continue with that under my leadership.
Okay. Mrs. Kane?
Thank you. We're going to speak on some questions on career and college readiness. Can you please give examples of your previous efforts and involvement with career technical, dual enrollment programs, or other specialized programs, and what have you initiated to improve and expand these programs?
Sure. Our district is a leader in the state around career technical education and even in the nation, and our Pinellas Education Foundation has been so critical in help leading us in that direction. Personally, in terms of answering the question about what have I done, I was principal at a school that had 4 career academies, 2 of which were the first 2 to be centers of excellence designations, one of which has been for 9 straight years the National Academy Foundation's highest award, only one of 4 in the country to earn that. That started under my leadership. I expanded a culinary program that was operating out of a classroom with a range that we would have in our house to a beautiful facility with multiple instructors. Revamped an automotive program that at the time we were still buffing out fenders, even though we were putting plastic bumpers on cars now, and rebuilt that into something that's more appropriate for the 21st century. At the district level, though, I think some of the things that we've done strategically are more important. We've really ramped up career dual enrollment for students in high school. So when I began in this position, we had anywhere between 80 and 120 students taking classes at Pinellas Technical College. We're in the 300, 400, 500 range now, which is really, really important, including getting that onto our high school campuses so that transportation isn't an issue for students. We've led a relook at industry certifications. Our career technical division here at the district level, with my support, we've served on state committees to look at those CAPE lists, those career funding lists, and make sure that the things that our students need and that our economy needs is really important. I've worked with our Pinellas Economic Development Council, different groups in our community to really look at those industries and make sure that we're meeting those needs. Some of the ones that we've done more recently, looking at manufacturing needs, looking at engineering expansion, and looking at IT, of course, in ways that aren't just career academy programs, but can be found in every neighborhood school. So our 6th grade science pilot that we're bringing next year is really about bringing that level to every neighborhood school, bringing 21st century, 22nd century technologies to students so that they see those things in action. But I also think that, at the end of the spectrum, our technical colleges have really revolutionized in the last couple of years. If you haven't been to Pinellas Technical College, St. Petersburg, and seen the heavy machinery simulator that we have there, it's remarkable, where companies are coming in and asking us, can you train our employees on this equipment so that they can go back out and build bridges and roads? Right now, you can't get time on that equipment, and that's something that we've done in the last couple of years through some of the stimulus funds to bring in, that we listened to our community and said, what do we need to bring in? And we've had a lot of success. But we're not done yet. I think we could have an engineering pathway in every one of our high schools. I think that's something we're missing. In the last 6 months, we've traveled to a district nearby, a couple counties away, to look at what they're doing around that, to see how we can expand that so that it's available in every single school and not just in magnet programs.
Perfect. You answered in many ways the second question I had with that statement, but I'm going to ask in if there's anything you want to include that you didn't include just a moment ago. In what ways will you build a cohesive academic transition between schools and among schools in the districts? What steps would you take to create cohesive college and career readiness, and identify for the district how you would see that identity manifesting in the schools throughout?
I think the college and career readiness question is a broader one in terms of not just career technical, right? So the implementation of Naviance has started in our district, where we have sort of required tasks at every grade level that students and parents, we want you to engage in so that you're college ready by the time you graduate high school. Our Elevating Excellence initiative, that's now in its 4th full year, to really bring all of those skills, college match, the 6 pillars that we built out around what's your pathway, how do you get financial aid, scholarship information. It's more than just creating those experiences for students, but it's getting them to understand their options, and then with their family, making the best choice. And so that can't start in 11th grade. If I don't have the background of skills and knowledge in 8th grade to choose courses in 9th grade, I'm out of the game for some universities. I'm out of the game for some career technical pathways. And so it's going down to 6th grade and building that pathway up. So we're excited about the implementation of Naviance. College and career centers will expand. That's in the leadership portfolio to all 16 traditional high schools next year. I think we're at 9 right now. And then with that expansion comes more support for our school counselors to get that work done during the day. So we've got some ideas on how to make that happen in a cost-neutral way to support those activities that we know are most important to get students prepared for college and careers. The transition piece that you asked about between 8th grade and 9th grade, that's why the portfolio is so important for students, that it carries through. And with every student now having a device and all of the things that we put on there, from their personalized learning pathway that builds that in for them, to their Naviance portfolio, and then into all the things that they'll do to eventually become a senior and know what all those choices are. It's critical that they have all of those pieces along the way. 2 weeks ago, we held our kind of launch for Elevating Excellence for this next year at Countryside High School. And I did the speech that I've done a number of times with parent groups. It was the first time we did it back in person. And I talked about college match and how it's so important. And when it was all over, this parent came up to me and said, hey, I want to let you know my child was in the first round of this. They're now at FSU, very successful. If it wasn't for the SAT tutoring I got from this, he wouldn't be there right now. And it's those types of things that every parent needs. And whether we like college test prep or not, it's here to stay for the time being, so we need to make sure our students are well advantaged in those. So it's all those things, including making sure those are available during the school day to all students. So it's not just if your parent can get you there in the summer or on a Saturday.
And last question, how would you expand local community partnerships and support to enhance and bolster our CTE program?
There is no shortage of local partnerships that we have in this district, but I think we can do more. We have a network of individuals that we always go to. We start with the Pinellas Education Foundation, their Career Technical Board, who've been phenomenal. We've engaged with chambers to a certain extent. I think we could do more with all of our chambers. The benefit of having 23 municipalities is that you end up with a lot of chambers and little local groups that really care about their corner of our county, but maybe don't care as much about what's happening in Clearwater or Tarpon Springs or St. Petersburg or wherever part they're not from. So it's tapping into those resources, because those local resources can be the greatest benefit. I think one of the good examples of that in the past is our Summer Career Acceleration Program. We tapped into the traditional places that you would think about, like our tourist industry and our ability to provide service jobs and airports and things like that. But we also tapped into nonprofits, groups that wouldn't be able to come to the table and say, here's the business benefit I can give you, but I can give you this bit of experience on a nonprofit end of how to go out and work with the public in a different way. And so sometimes we limit ourselves to thinking about the Jables and Raymond James and Tech Datas, and yes, we've had great relationships with all of those. I've worked with all of those personally. But there are hundreds and hundreds of small businesses, including nonprofits, that we can continue to tap into. So how do we do that? We involve them in local schools. They want to be involved in the school in their neighborhood, and we've seen great examples of that through our business partner celebrations and others, but it just continues to have us go out and do that. I think one of the great resources we hired in our career technical education program was an apprenticeship supervisor who really goes out and does those one-to-one communications to say, I've got a student who's interested in this. Are you interested in bringing this to your business, your community, whatever that is, including municipalities, because many of our students work in our cities as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Ms. Hine?
Good morning, Mr. Hendrick. I'm going to be asking you about effective and efficient use of resources today. So from a district perspective, explain how student performance standards affect the planning and prioritizing of facilities, fiscal, technological, and human resource projects, and all those moving pieces. And then also, so those kind of priorities and how you make those decisions. And then in difficult financial times, how would you prioritize either additions or cuts to the budget?
I'll start with the good part. So I think our facilities are so important for a lot of reasons. Our students deserve the best. They deserve to go to a school that's well-maintained, that's clean, and whether it's historic or built this year, it looks like it's brand new, right? And we've seen great examples of that in all of our schools that are beautiful, whether they're 100 years old or whether they were just built recently. So that has to happen for our students and our employees. And so we've been very fortunate and great stewards of our fiscal resources in this district, and with the bonding that the board has done, we've been able to go out and accelerate some of those projects, and it's really made an impact and a difference for those communities that have received those. So having our 5-year plan, being clear about that we participate in, we bring to the board and to the public to look at, is important. It can't be anecdotal. It can't be, oh, I like this neighborhood or that one. It needs to be scheduled in a plan, and our 5-year plan has done that. The 5-year plan, though, does include academics and student performance, which was part of your question. So if we're rebuilding Seminole High School, which we're going to be doing in the next couple of years, what are the academic components that our students need at that school, and how has that changed since it was built in 1948 or whatever it was. So we have a technical high school down the street. Do we need to rebuild some of the same programs across the street? No. What are those other programs that might come in that might attract students to that school who have been leaving for other programs, whether it be Osceola Fundamental or a career academy? Seminole's a great example of that in terms of a school that had a ton of community pride for decades and decades, and then with all the other changes and resources, it's chipped away. So their enrollment's gone down. So how do you use those facility projects to build that back up? And we've had great examples of all over our community in which we've done that. Those priorities need to be attached to academics. They also need to be attached in an equitable and fairness way so that all students are receiving those supports. And so, yes, we want to provide perhaps a new science wing with state-of-the-art engineering and drone technology and all those things, but not at the expense of another school not even having the basic lab facilities that they need. So we have to balance both of those things. So in bad times, how do we address that? We always have to lead with safety, security, and regular maintenance. And I think that's sometimes where districts have gotten themselves in trouble, is not thinking about the regular maintenance. So what's the regular maintenance? Just the basics of air conditioning, making sure the lights, the electricity, the water fountains, the cleanliness of our athletic facilities. Those basic things need to be there before we get big and bold and shiny with new other spaces. And so in downtimes, that has to be the focus. You cannot rebuild massive high schools and middle school projects if your air conditioning is not working in some of your schools. In terms of monitoring that and support, certainly teaching and learning has had a seat at all of those meetings. We don't go out and worry about every construction project once it's done, but the front side of that, we're always involved in those things. So what do classrooms need to look like? What does an art classroom need to look like? What's the baseline of an art classroom? What would it be if we could ramp that up a little bit more? What would it be in a music classroom? What would it be in a science lab? So we supply all of that to our construction division so that they know what those specs are, so that when they go out and do it, it meets the needs of academics. And so that cycle and process needs to continue to happen at all levels in order to prioritize those facilities for academics.
Thank you. There are many resource investments that drive student achievement, and we know that at the very top is the quality, commitment, and joy of our teachers. Our responsibility is to recruit, retain, and inspire the best and brightest. So share what you know and your thoughts regarding rapidly rising costs of living here in Pinellas County, how we financially address that paralleled with the fact that we have lower teacher compensation in our state per capita compared to other states, and how we could look at that, do the math, and perhaps advocate in that area. What are your thoughts there?
First and foremost is retention. Typically, employees don't quit their job, they quit their situation, right? So when they leave a school, when they leave a district office, when they leave Walter Pinellas Service Center, they're leaving a situation. If they were really, really happy, if they had great joy in what they were doing, if they had all the support they needed, they would stay, because we know that because we see that in our employees every day. So in terms of making that, once you get past that sort of great relationship, which is not easy to get to, what are some other initiatives and things that we could potentially do? Certainly connecting with our municipalities around workforce housing is really important. And I know we have some ideas for some big projects, but there's a lot of untapped resources that we're already doing. We've met with the city of St. Petersburg around the things that they're doing, the city of Clearwater and Largo around the different opportunities that they have for our employees to access the resources that those cities and towns and municipalities already have. So I think making sure our employees are aware of those things are really important. Connecting our ability to give raises and to retain all of our employees comes with advocacy with our state legislator as well. Yes, we're excited that our starting pay is great. We're also excited that our district recognizes with the referendum that we can do better, perhaps, than some other communities. But it's not enough. We've all seen the reports. Most recently, I think Ed Week put out of Florida 48th in average teacher salary. And if we're average in 48th in teacher salary, we're 48th in support employees and bus drivers and all those, because it all is from the same pot of money. So one of the, some of the things we can do, Mrs. Hine, is number one, we can be as fiscally responsible as possible. Don't waste money on programs or priorities that aren't really important to the success of our students, so that we can support all of our employees in doing that. Building partnerships with our municipalities, with the Pinellas Education Foundation, with our housing authorities, anybody that has the ability to influence those factors that come and would drive retention. So whether that is making sure our employees know that when they cable service, right, they can get a cheaper version if they're a teacher employee, things like that. We have to make those as public as we can in order to do. And then I think there are some smaller incentives that we can do even through our risk management division. I briefly worked in another school district that had tremendous discount rates on rental cars and hotels when you traveled. I'm not sure why our district doesn't have that, but every employee in that district had that. And that was an important little incentive for when they had to rent a car over the summer or something like that. So there's smaller ways to do that. But I think largely is being responsible with our budget and then putting those priorities where they most impact student outcomes.
Thank you. So imagine you could put aside what is and from the ground up design the resources that you desired for top success in college, career, and life here in Pinellas County. And what would that look like? Maybe it looks similar to what we're currently doing, but or are there areas, which areas might see a plus or minus delta from where they are now? How would you see your role in those discussions and advocacy for those kinds of resources for public education, the board's role? So just that idea of creating it from the ground up.
So, with the blank slate, which we don't have in Pinellas County because we are built out, right? I would look first at the investment that we do with our teachers and employees. It's so critical, as I started out with today, around the culture and climate aspect. So building around a system that has all the supports that people need. So one of the things that I would love to do is have an onboarding process that isn't reliant on, oh my gosh, we don't have a substitute, you got to get in the classroom today. But let's take 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks to let you go job shadow and to really train you on the things that are important to our classroom and our district. We've kicked that idea around with our professional development and human resources department of an onboarding process that's sort of like that 1 week Embrace Pinellas, but then maybe 3 more weeks where you can really look and see. Because when people are onboarded properly, there's great retention because they understand the system and they understand those services. So if we had an unlimited amount of resources and the ability to do those things and reset, I would start with how do we bring our employees in? What's that experience? Similarly, I would do the same thing with our students and families when they come to our schools. So if we had an unlimited resources and somebody to take every family on an individual tour, which in a 300-student elementary is very easy, in a 2,000-student high school can be very difficult, I would have every experience when they walk in the door to be one where parents get to sit and talk with someone one-on-one for as long as it takes that they have all those things. And then when they walked out, they'd have their computer, their books, their backpack, all the things they needed, their lunch account would be set up, all of those onboarding experiences. Now, why don't we do that now? It's scarcity of resources, right? You walk into the front office, I'm the one person, there's one principal, we have 3 teachers out today, we're running around, we're covering lunches, who's watching recess. We do the best that we can, but if we had those resources, I think that was where I would start. So whether that's a person who's dedicated just to do that at schools or even at a district level, it would be a great investment. On a more capital side, facilities. I think our facilities, as much as we've invested, that's one of the few things that all of our community sees. I used to joke with our high school football coaches, our teachers can do a lot of things, but their score isn't in the paper on Saturday. Yours is, right? And there's 2,000 people that came to watch it. So our facilities should be top-notch, and our students deserve that in all places, including the arts and athletics and everywhere in between.
Thank you.
Okay. We're going to move on to Mrs. Cook now.
All right, I have the area of communication and stakeholder engagement. When a new superintendent is hired, you want to make the transition as smooth as possible for everyone. How would you help both the educational community and the community at large adjust to a new governing style that would come with the new superintendent?
Everybody's different, right? And that's a benefit and a detractor. So without a doubt, there are large shoes to fill. I thought they were size 16. He told me it's only a 10. But nonetheless, you have to acknowledge the past, right? You have to acknowledge what's occurred. You have to understand what's occurred. Obviously, with my background, I can hit the ground running in almost all of those areas. Communication-wise, I think there are some key groups and constituent groups to meet with right away, and whether that's in the transition period or shortly after beginning, touching base with all of those community groups, and I put some in the entry plan that you can reference that I think would be really important to touch base with early on. And so some of those, obviously, our Education Foundation, our municipalities, some of the groups like CoQuebs and different groups that we regularly interact with. The good news for me is I already interact with all those groups all the time. So it's a little bit of a different role, but certainly setting more of a vision and understanding of experience that we can do together. I think communication styles, though, there are some things that I would do different in terms of being the superintendent. I plan on having a social media presence so that, when I visit schools, when I'm out in the community, that we share those things more regularly, that we celebrate teachers in those ways. There's a lot of good that can come when someone visits your classroom and then they hear about it again in some other way, in a positive way. So not in ways that we post those things on Facebook for everybody to comment on, but in ways that are positive, that people get the recognition, sort of in a outwardly facing fashion. So I think those little things are important. But then, there's communication with the school board. That's going to be a big change for each of you. And so I share in my entry plan some ways in which I think we can structure that so that it's successful for each of us as that transition occurs.
All right, and that leads right into the next question. How would you ensure that school board members be informed on important matters? How would you ensure that the public is informed on those important matters? And how would you ensure that the staff be informed on important matters?
Yeah. Communication and timely communication is really important. So there's multiple ways to do that, and it depends on what the issue is or what the need is. But I think that in a district as large as we are, there are easy vehicles to communicate. And so whether that is the weekly email that we send to all of our employees, or whether it's a video message from the superintendent, or a phone call to all parents, whatever those things are, there are easy ways to send it out to everybody. Of course, that includes all of the other media and communication outlets that we can communicate from. Sometimes that message needs to be delivered just from the superintendent. There were messages during the pandemic or in times of sorrow or concern that have to be really clear and direct from the superintendent. There are other times that those messages can be delivered by principals, by teachers, by support employees, by other individuals. So it doesn't have to be a situation where communication can only come through one person or one or two people. There are other ways to do that. In terms of structuring that communication and changes that we have, you all know the cadence of how you receive communication, both via phone calls, email, the weekly email, certainly at workshops and the board. I think all of those are healthy and good. I think one area that I would look to strengthen a little bit more is the workshop process and being a little more in depth on some of that and garnering some of your feedback a little bit more, whether it's ahead of time or at the workshop, so that the process is more holistic and gives a voice to the public more. And in that, the public sees transparency and communication, which I think is healthy.
Okay, good, thank you. This is a diverse community, so how would you work to ensure that all groups are fully engaged with the schools and the system as a whole? And how would you work with special interest groups?
So getting back to communication and engaging, we have a lot of ways in which we do that. Some are in-person meetings. So for example, our special education advisory meetings, which have been virtual, but when we did those in person, we would get 100 people come to that, which is really good engagement. For our EL and Hispanic community, our Facebook page in Spanish is amazing. When we need bilingual assistance and we have positions and vacancies, we post on there, and people respond through the bilingual Facebook page. They don't go to our website for that. They go to the place that they're comfortable with. So it's finding those outlets that are comfortable that are important. In terms of special interest groups, we have them now, and we're going to have new ones in the future, and some that we've had in the past have gone away. And sometimes we think, oh yeah, we did have that group, and what happened to it? You have to give folks an opportunity to have their voice heard, to be listened to, and then responded to in some way. And again, sometimes the response is, I heard you, I listened. That's not the action we're going to take, but we appreciate your advocacy, and that's enough. Sometimes that is just going to a meeting and listening and sharing the communication that you think is important to share that message from the school district. That meeting can be in person, it can be virtual, and it doesn't always have to be the superintendent. It can be other members of the leadership staff. It could be school principals sometimes deliver a message to a community or a special interest group that's only focused on one community. That's more important than having a district person go and deliver that message. So whatever the vehicle is, I think we all know that there's lots of vehicles. The important part is you just have to address and give a voice. And it doesn't need to dominate, because that's the other side of the coin, is it appears that 2 or 3 people who come to a board meeting or send an email are the voice of thousands. No, that's not always true either. You have to listen to it, respond, but don't let it run and dominate everything that you do. And we've been successful with that, especially in the last 3 years with the pandemic. Different groups for different ways. We've listened to folks, we've made decisions that we believe are in the best interest of our students and staff, and then you move forward.
Thank you. What has been your role and experience in working with the legislative delegation, and what should the role of the superintendent be in that relationship?
So my role in the past several years has been, to participate in all of those meetings that we've had with our legislative delegation. I've been to Tallahassee during their sessions, visited individually with legislators to advocate for things on behalf of the district personally. In terms of the superintendent's role, the superintendent has to make sure that our legislative delegation understands the needs of our community. While it's important to advocate for the entire state, what comes first is the needs of Pinellas County and its students and its staff. And so our needs are unique, just like every other district in the state is unique. So having individual meetings with state legislators, communicating with them regularly, and then having them understand our platform. I do like the work that we've done in sharing our platform with state legislators. It's very symbolic also to have everybody in the same room at the same time, and we'll continue that. But it's the more infrequent conversations that perhaps get things done in a more powerful way. And so I've had those conversations. I've been able to help draft legislation that you all have seen and has been put forward on behalf of the entire state that our district has taken the lead on. There are a number of things in the last 3 or 4 years that I've had the privilege to work on with our legislators, their delegation and the folks that help with that, and then with our lobbyists in Tallahassee who do a great job with us, and I've worked closely with them. So filling that role is not a big leap for me. I look forward to it. And as I said, I think in my letter and in a couple places in the leadership portfolio, being the face and sharing those points of pride and being clear on what we need is something I really look forward to.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Dudley.
Madam Chair. Mr. Hendrick, mine is general leadership. And I want you to describe an accomplishment that you are most proud of.
There's a lot, I guess, thinking to different parts of my career. I guess an accomplishment that I'm most proud of, because I'm grounded in schools mostly. I became a teacher because I loved working with kids. I think would be the high school principalship. High school principals, middle school principals, elementary principals are mayors of their own towns. Elementary principals run around the halls and the kids look at them like, they're the president. And it's exciting. So I think when you lead an organization like you do as a principal, you have the ability to touch everything, right? How people see your building, what it looks like on your website, what it looks like when students enter the cafeteria, how they exit with transcripts, what's on that transcript. And it was a great 9-year run to be a high school principal. And looking back at my career thus far, that's something I'm pretty proud of.
Thank you. We have several qualified finalists for the position. Why should the school board select you?
The great part about being local is people have known you for a long, long time. So I've lived in Pinellas County for 35 years, went to our schools, have taught and led in our schools, and certainly worked at the district office. All of those things are important, and yes, there's a continuity aspect that's important, but I would suggest to you that that's not the most important reason to select me. The most important reason is the quality of the work that I've done. I value people and relationships and respectful relationships. I think that is critical, and for the superintendent, you can't have anything but that in terms of ethical and moral excellence, and somebody who's going to, in every dealing with every parent, with every business partner, with every vendor, treat people with respect, and also get what you need for the school district. So you can be friendly and positive and all those things, but does it lead to results? And I think my record over 24 years as an educator has been incredibly positive and has been done so in a way in which each of you would be proud of and what you would want for your own families. The other pieces, the investment. You know, as you know, I have a child in our schools. Family members teach in our schools. It's important to me that things go well for our school district, personally and professionally. And when you combine that with the other pieces, I think I make myself an attractive candidate.
As a superintendent handles a variety of responsibilities. Which do you feel most qualified to handle and why? In what areas would it need the most support?
Obviously, as a person who worked in schools and leading our district's academics, the academic part is one I'm very well qualified to lead. Certainly in the last 5 years of working at the district level and a couple of years prior to that working at the district level, I've learned all the other parts of our business, and you know, from our operational services to even our legal side, certainly our financial side. So there's a lot of pieces that I'm very confident in. There are some pieces that I've never had direct oversight over. Yes, I've had direct oversight over millions and millions and millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, but not $1 billion, right? Which is, our budget is well over $1 billion. So there are pieces that you have to rely on expertise, and you can't funnel every decision through one person. You have to have knowledgeable folks who are leaders in the industry and make sure that they make the decisions that we all want them to make, and then have checks and balances and ways to follow up on those things that are going well. So, you know, the obvious answers of things that what are the things that I could improve upon or learn more about? Certainly financial operations, the legal part, but I would also suggest I'm pretty well versed in those for someone who's never led those divisions.
And lastly, what is the most important part of the superintendent's job?
You know, at the end of the day, the superintendent is the person who everybody looks at for leadership. And I think I said that in my video to you, that I look forward to that responsibility. I look forward to being the voice of the district. I look forward to being the one who can speak about our academics, who can speak about our budget, who can speak about the impact that this system has on our community. And being a salesman for that, being a cheerleader for it, and being a champion for it. That's exciting. It's fun, and you know, in smaller ways, I've done that in other parts of my career, and I look forward to doing it on a larger platform for many years to come.
Mr. Hendrick, is there any additional information that you would like to share with the board members?
How much time do I have, Ms. Long?
7 minutes.
All right, good.
And I have one more question.
Okay. Just a quick orientation to the two documents that I did give to you. The first one is just a leadership portfolio that outlines some of the things that I think are important for our district in terms of success. But on the first page, if you look around it, I view the transition phase and an entry plan really around 3 pillars. One is around academic excellence and student experiences, and I look forward to talking more to you about the idea of our students are excellent sometimes in the classroom, and because of technology and the ways that we've grown in the last couple of years, they can receive an education almost from anywhere. And some students will even do better just using their computer at home. But what are those student experiences that make our schools to the point where you have to come? I want to come, right? I want to be here because the experience I'm getting is second to none, and I can't get it sitting at home. I can't get it in another school. And so as you look through this, you'll see some ideas and things around student experiences. The second pillar is communication, collaboration, and culture. I think you asked a lot of those questions, and so you'll see examples of that in here. And the third, we talked a lot about this, is strong partnerships. And so I built a little bit of this plan, but certainly the entry plan, which is the second document, around those ideas of those pillars. And so you can see on page 2, some of the things, it's the one with the blue bars going across it of the entry plan. Some of the things that I think are really important in the transition and entry, and some that are new. For example, under student experiences, I think initiating some student leadership experiences, so I call it out there as student advisory councils and engagement sessions, is something exciting and that we should do to engage our students at a different level. There's some things in each area that are a little bit new that if you take a look at those, you'll see are kind of exciting ideas. Page 3, I outlined some personal goals that would be important for me as your superintendent. And then the pages after that outline sort of the different ways in which the entry plan would occur, starting with the next couple of weeks, and then eventually into July, the start of the school year, and then into January. So interaction with the board, our district strategic plan, how to engage with staff, our external partners, our internal operations, school year readiness, and then even a transition in teaching and learning. So hopefully we'll have a chance to talk about some of those in the one-on-one interviews, and you'll get a chance to take a look at some of the things we've done together, but also some new ideas within there.
Do you have any questions for the board members?
I do not.
All right. Well, thank you for your interest and participation in the process. You have 2 full days with interviews, community meet and greets, tours, and more. Tomorrow, you will meet individually with each board member for a one-on-one interviews. Please let FSBA know, the staff know, if you have any questions or concerns. Thank you, Mr. Hendrick.
Thank you, Mrs. Long. Thank you, board members. Look forward to seeing you all tomorrow or later today.